Thank you all. Good to see you. I have to talk to you after the sit-down. All right, thank you all for joining us today as we formally announce recommendations from the work group I established to develop a legal, fully vetted, and thoughtful police body camera program. I would first like to thank our co-chairs, Pastor Jamal Bryant, James Benjamin, as well, and James Benjamin for leading the work group. I was extremely proud to have such strong co-chairs and work group members. I think the way that you get to a strong product is by having strong members of the team, and I'm really pleased about that. I also want to thank Stephanie Robinson for all of her hard work in staffing these efforts, as well as everyone who served on the working group. And I want to thank my colleagues in government who are here today. One of the members who is also a colleague in government, Councilman Brandon Scott, is here. The Dean of the City Council, my only vote on this, I think, Councilwoman Ricky Spector, and Councilman Bobby Curran is here as well. And I'll talk about Delegate Anderson in a little bit, but I want to thank him for being here as well. I'm very grateful for the service of everyone who participated. A key goal of my administration has always been to grow Baltimore by 10,000 families over the next decade. In order for us to grow a city, we have to attract new residents, but most importantly, we have to give those residents who are here more reasons to stay. Baltimore City cannot continue to grow unless we work aggressively at bringing more transparency to policing while closing the breach between the police and the community. Without a doubt, we are headed in the right direction. 2014 saw a double-digit drop in overall crime and in homicides. Over the years, we've witnessed significant decreases in the number of excessive force complaints, and we've seen reductions in the number of lawsuits filed against the police. Discourtesy complaints are also trending down. We're working collaboratively with the Department of Justice to adopt additional best practices, and we're hard at work implementing a new police contract. That police contract will put more officers on the streets during peak periods of time, something we've heard, all of us have heard from our constituents, that is very important. Yet even with these remarkable strides forward, I often hear concerns from city residents who want to see even bolder reforms put in place. They understand, as I do, that the status quo has failed us for too long. And if we're serious about changing our city, we must continue to press forward with more accountability and with greater transparency. I believe that implementation of a police body camera program will bring more accountability and will bring more transparency while demonstrating to Baltimore residents that we hear their concerns and we're fighting like hell every day to make a difference in their lives. I care deeply about getting this right, which is why I insisted that the group be established to conduct a rigorous and thorough analysis before moving forward. The recommendations put forward today take into account policy, cost, and privacy concerns. The work group met for hours and heard from a broad range of experts covering the fields of law enforcement, IT, security, and law. These were spirited and lively discussions. I think that's fair to say.
At least.
But as a result of all of this hard work, we now have a set of strong recommendations that will better position Baltimore City to become one of the largest cities in America to successfully launch a police body camera program. As we move forward, with these recommendations, there is no doubt that there will be challenges along the way. We need to meet those challenges head on and continue to work toward additional reforms that will help build the relationship between the police and the community and make it even stronger. Residents who would like to comment should do so by March the 6th. So we're starting a public comment period And I ask for those comments to be made by March the 6th by mailing feedback.bodyworncamera@baltimorecity.gov. feedback.bodyworncamera@baltimorecity.gov. Now I'd like to ask our co-chair, Mr. James Benjamin, to make a few remarks, and we're going to hear from a few more people as well. James.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Good evening. Thank you to Mayor Rawlings-Blake, to my fellow co-chair, Pastor Bryant, and to everyone on our working group for their efforts. I was honored to be selected as a co-chair of this working group, and am grateful to have had the opportunity to work with this group of community leaders, clergy, financial analysts, and attorneys. We are very proud to have a mayor that understands that improving public safety is about more than statistics. It's about how the community feels. And over the past few months, this group has spent significant time carefully developing recommendations that address the mayor's core concerns around data storage, cost, and most importantly, protecting the privacy of city residents. We didn't take this task lightly. We understood that not many other cities have managed to successfully implement body camera programs on a wide scale. It was critically important that we take our time and work through all of the issues. We had very passionate, robust discussions of these issues. We heard from representatives from law enforcement, IT, security, and finance. And given the high stakes involved, it was absolutely critical that these issues be thoroughly reviewed by a broad cross-section of professionals. We have strived to be as thorough as possible as we work to fulfill the mayor's mission of providing a fully vetted, well thought out, and legal body camera program. These thoughtful recommendations will help our police be more accountable to the community, to those they are sworn to serve. And mind you, we're still working on this, and we look forward to, as a group, to reviewing the public comments. Again, I want to thank Mayor Rawlings-Blake, Pastor Bryan, and everyone who has served on the working group for their hard work. And we look forward to continuing that work together. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite David Roca with the ACLU to come up and to make brief remarks. And I really want to thank you. The thing that I appreciate the most about this work group is not just the level of professionals, but they're professionals who most of the time aren't on the same side, but for a greater good, we're willing to sit down at the table and really have what we'll call them robust discussions to get us to a better place in Baltimore. So I'm really grateful for that. And watch the cord. Sorry.
So I want to thank Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake for including us and other community members on the task force. And I want to thank all of the members of the task force for what has been a long and involved, but I think very fruitful process and discussion. And I think Baltimore has undertaken its thinking and process for adopting body cameras in a far more inclusive and in-depth way than I've seen probably anywhere else. I think that the recommendations, I think it's striking that the recommendations of this work group are, with one exception, unanimous. And I think that reflects on the importance of this issue and the importance of this tool as a way of giving the public some new and meaningful measure of transparency and accountability, which I think is critical to having an effective police force that I think everyone wants. I think we have worked hard to think about the many difficult issues that body cameras raise, and I think, just speaking for myself, it's also important to acknowledge that body cameras are not a panacea. They won't solve every single problem or every single issue there is in policing. And as one of my colleagues on the task force, Mark, has pointed out a number of times, the existence of a videotape is not by itself a guarantee that we will all see the videotape and understand and interpret the videotape in the same way. And I think that's true. But I do think it's important to say that without the videotape, what you have is a set of competing narratives and a difficulty to ascertain the truth. And with a videotape, you have far greater hope of ascertaining the truth of a situation, and you allow decisions to be made on the basis of facts and evidence, not preconceptions, of which I think exist on both sides of this issue as with any other. So it has been, I think, a remarkable process. I think the recommendations here are strong and necessary, and I think and hope that it will lead to both better policing and greater public faith and trust in policing, which I think we all think is critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate that. Now I would like to ask Councilman Scott to make remarks, and then we're going to hear from Delegate Anderson, and then I'll open it up for some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. This is something that I am very, very blessed to have served on. We all know that in Baltimore, whether real or perceived, we're dealing with decades and generations long of mistrust with police. Again, as David said, and a lot of our members of our group know, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. This is one tool, one piece of a very large puzzle of repairing a broken relationship with the police and the community, which we all know in particular are in segments of the African American community. This group, I think, is going to set the mold. This is going to be the model that is going to be used across the country on how to develop body-worn camera policies throughout major cities. This is something that, again, as David said, that we didn't take anything lightly. From us, we argued, even those of us who are on the community side argued about what was best for the community. But when you're doing something like this, that is about building public trust, that is going to be spending taxpayer dollars, every I must be dotted, every T must be crossed, and every single possibility must be discussed. And I think that we did that here, and moving forward, we're going to make sure that we have the best policy possible so that we can start to repair those relationships. Again, this is just the beginning. We know we have a problem. This is one solution to a larger problem, and I am blessed to and honored to serve with these people behind me on this task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Anderson?
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank Mayor Rawlings-Blake for allowing me to serve on the task force. There was a lot of time spent, not just in the general task force meetings, but also in the subgroups that met. We all met and then met again in the general task force meetings. And I think that the recommendations that we've come up with are a great basis for what's going to become a policy in the Baltimore City Police Department. It's a pilot program. And I think that's the most valuable part of our recommendations, is to make sure that we test this thing out, like a test pilot. You take a new plane up, you put a test pilot in there to see if it works. Things that don't work, things that break, we try to fix during the pendency of the pilot program. And I think that's the most important part of this entire recommendation, this entire process. The other most important part are the men and women that will be wearing these cameras. We've all said that most of the problem that exists in Baltimore City or in police departments around the state or the country exists because of a very small percentage of police officers. That means that there's a very large percentage of police officers who want to do good, who want to make sure the community is safe, and want to be appreciated for the jobs they do. It's these men and women that will be wearing the cameras, and they're the ones that will make sure, or at least ensure, that this program is successful by how they manipulate the cameras, how they use the cameras, and how the information from the cameras is reported back. So I look forward to the pendency of the pilot program. I offer the mayor my services during the entire time that the program is in effect. If she wants us to come back at the end of the pilot program and fine-tune, I'll be happy to do that. But I think that the mayor and the leaders that you see standing up here today have made an excellent start for a pilot program that's going to be comprehensive and hopefully very successful in Baltimore City.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank all of the members of the work group, and I encourage the public to really take a look at this. I know that because of a water main issue, we had to postpone the public meeting, but the public comment period will begin, and the report is available online, and we encourage people again to give us some good feedback at feedback.bodyworncamera@baltimorecity.gov. All right, and with that, I'll open it up for questions. Just from press. I'll talk to you in a little bit. Thank you. Yes, anybody?
Madam Mayor, I know that you said that you're waiting on public feedback and that kind of thing, but what can you tell us tonight that you believe about these recommendations the residents will like most, and why?
You know, I think when you talk about spending the type of money that we'll spend on this program, I think the public will like that we actually took our time. I mean, many of you have reported on jurisdictions around the country who rushed to implement body camera programs, and that have cost the taxpayers a lot more money because they did not have a thoughtful and careful implementation process. And I think that the work that each of the members of the task force put in is going to save taxpayers. It could ultimately save taxpayers millions.
To follow up from my colleague Keith, so the thoughtfulness and the time that the panel took to look at the issue, that's why you believe that this program will succeed where so many others have fell short?
It's not just that they were thoughtful; they're smart, and they took a look at the issues and came up with some solutions that we think will fit for Baltimore. And like I said, if you take a look at the individuals, you know that these are people who have a whole lot of differences, but came together to make sure that we got this right. And I think it's because of their hard work, we're put in a much better position as a city to have a program that that does what we want it to do. It's an effective body-worn camera program that also improves and increases the trust between the community and the police.
Question for Mr. Benjamin. How was it working with so many different groups, civil rights, lawyers, law enforcement community? Can you talk a little bit about the interactions with the group? I mean, you gave a clue that they were lively discussions.
They were very lively discussions, but we all were committed to the process and to doing what we could to further transparency, accountability. And so while we definitely had a lot of different viewpoints, we realized that it was important to come together for the greater good, and I think that's what we were able to do.
Madam Mayor, excuse me, but going back to the point of what you think residents will like most about these recommendations. For example, one of the recommendations is cameras should be operated during every interaction with the public. There's another recommendation, law enforcement personnel should alert citizens as soon as practicable when a body-worn camera is operational. Examples like that. What do you think the public will like most about these recommendations?
I think the public will like most that we put policy recommendations in place that will protect their privacy, that will give them some autonomy when they should. You know, it's not like when the police are in pursuit of someone, they're going to give them the option to turn the camera off. But when the police are investigating, we want to protect the privacy of the public, and I think the policies will do that, and in doing so, also protect officers as well.
And please, next question for you and Delegate Anderson on this particular point. I know I've heard like 2 or 3 times that there were robust discussions. Can you give us one point of concern that perhaps created some of that robust discussion for you and Delegate Anderson or Councilman Scott or even with Carmen?
You want to go first?
Go ahead, you go ahead.
Age before beauty.
Delegate, what was one of those concerns that created this robust discussion that you referred to?
Well, you know, there's going to be a perception by the public that now that we have body cameras, everything is going to be fine. And one of the things we wanted to make sure is that that perception isn't undercut by policies that don't create that. As Councilman Scott said, this is not a silver bullet. This is not the perfect solution. But one of the discussions was whether or not, for instance, should the officer who has the camera on in completing his report, should that video be allowed to be seen by another officer who was on the scene at the time? Or should that video be allowed to be seen by the state's attorney's office? And so these things we went back and forth on and argued about. You know, we want to make sure that the videos were transparent, that people have access to them. How much is it going to cost? You know, I mean, that's a lot of money for a police department. I understood where the police department was coming from. You know, they're saying that they can't reproduce everything that everybody wants at a cost that's going to keep them, allow them to stay in business. And we argued, no, this is a free program. People who pay taxes, who are citizens of the city of Baltimore, ought to have access. So we argued about these things, and we're still trying to resolve those. So obviously the police department doesn't want to spend more than the $7 or $8 million they're going to spend trying to just have staff reproduce videos.
Especially since the state law allows us to charge.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. That's a good point. But so there was, you know, discussion about it. And look, it wasn't, you know, calling each other names or anything like that, but we kept making points about the public's right to view them, the public's access, the press's access. And we know that the press will make a lot of requests, and we have to try to come up with common ground whereby this will not cost us, the proverbial arm and a leg. I'm sorry, go ahead, Brandon.
And another one, a very good point. We think that one of the biggest points of contention that we had, especially even in our group, was whether if the cameras should be running the whole officer's entire shift, right? We debated that for a long period of time. But first and foremost, the technology doesn't allow for that right now. But also, if that was to happen, there are a lot of our privacy concerns that come up, workers' rights and things like that. That was something that we argued quite a bit about, because thinking in the average citizen's mind, they're going to think, oh, if they only have to turn it on then, they might forget, they might do this. But practically and physically now, by allowing technology does not allow for the cameras to be on 24/7, 365. 3, 4, 5 years from now, as the technology evolves, they may change. And if that changes, then the policy may have to change. But for right now, this is where we are in that state of the technology.
Thank you.
Mayor, can you explain that one recommendation that a person could allow to have the camera shut off as long as it's recorded on video? Why go that route if the intent is to protect the officer and the public?
Dave.
Thank you.
So the concern that, one primary concern that we're trying to address is the public perception that officers will simply not turn on their camera if they're doing something wrong. I think it's clear that that concern exists. So how do you deal with that? One possible solution, as Councilman Scott said, is you simply say the cameras are always on. But that imposes its own set of problems and costs. Once you acknowledge the fact, and I think it is a fact, that there are going to be circumstances where a camera is going to have to be turned off, then you are back in some sense to square one, which is how do you deal with discretion? You also don't want a policy that is so detailed and riddled with exceptions that it can't be followed. Humans are fallible, humans make mistakes, and if you want to minimize those mistakes, you need a policy that is clear and concise and easy to follow. And so what we agreed on was a policy that sets a presumption that when police are encountering citizens, the camera is on. But I think we as a group also recognize that there are lots of police-citizen encounters where it doesn't make sense to have a camera on. There are times, if I'm a crime victim, I may want to talk to the police without that interaction being recorded. I'm going to be saying all kinds of sensitive things. I may not yet even know that I want to pursue criminal charges. I may be a witness and I may be afraid of retaliation if a video record is kept of my conversation with police. There's lots of other examples that you can think of. And so we made a bright line between there are certain things that have to be recorded, and that is when officers are exercising their state-granted authority, when they are involuntarily controlling what I as a citizen do, when they're stopping me, when they're arresting me, when they're searching me, when they're executing a warrant. I don't have a choice in those matters. The police are in some sense doing those things to me. Those things have to be recorded. But there are lots of other police-citizen interactions where that isn't the case, where I have a choice whether or not to continue the conversation, whether to let police into my house. And for those interactions, I have the right to say, I want to speak to you, but I don't want to be recorded. And that makes it critically important that the officers say at the outset of the encounter that the recording is happening for two reasons. One, so that if I do have a choice, I can say no. But two, part of the reason that these cameras are helpful and useful is that there is at least some evidence that they help change behavior both of the police themselves and behavior of the people that they encounter. And to me, at least, that comports with at least my own experience and what I think of as common sense. I speak differently when I know that there are all these cameras recording me now than I would in a casual conversation, and I act differently. And so
you do act differently.
So the cameras are not a guarantee that everybody will act perfectly, but they do have the potential, and as I said, there is evidence from other cities that they indeed have this effect of changing how people behave. But that effect will only happen if everyone knows that recording is taking place. So the idea is, at the outset of an encounter, as early as possible, the officer says that there is a camera that's recording, and if that person is not subject to the officer's control but can terminate the encounter, then that person has the option to say, I don't want to talk to you with the camera rolling. And that interaction, that request, is captured on camera for the protection of both the resident and the officer, so that it's clear that the camera was turned off, not so that the officer could hide misconduct, but because the citizen requested it. And if during the further course of that encounter, the officer decides that he or she has to take some enforcement action with respect to that person, then the camera is supposed to come back on. In other words, the camera is on when officers are exercising their authority in over us as residents of Baltimore. Does that answer your?
As far as next steps, Madam Mayor, you said in the past that there's a budget supplemental bill that has to be sent to the City Council. How soon will they see that?
So again, we have the public comment period. We want to do that. We have some estimates about a pilot. So we are moving this process along. I don't want to give you a hard and fast date, but we are definitely moving it forward.
Wouldn't expect one.
Mayor.
It's not nice.
No, I really wouldn't expect like.
Then why would you ask me?
Well, you might have an idea.
Madam Mayor, this question, the pilot program.
Yes.
It's a set time. What has to happen, in your opinion, for you to say it's not going to work?
Well, I don't think it's not just going to be my opinion. This is going to be a very transparent process, and we want to make sure that we have the right technology available at the right price, and that we're going to be able to do what everyone who's been looking at this program says we want to do. And if we can't do those things, then we have to ask ourselves a question, then what next, right? But we have to go through all of the steps. And I think, you can't, I don't want to presuppose what the problems will be, because I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to get this right.
Do you think officers are going to end up writing a report about an incident the way they do it now? Or will they be allowed to kind of go look and check the video to see if they remember?
Yeah, I don't.
How do you think that's going to go?
It depends on the circumstances. So if an officer's making a routine arrest, he'll be able to go back and look at the report. But if we have an officer-involved shooting, that's a little different. We don't want the officer going back and looking at that to refresh their memory. We want to interview them first, then go back and look at the video.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. And I want to thank all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come on. Send me my email.
Thank you.